Kok nggak ada suara ya?
Ada, jelas.
Jelas, Prof.
Jelas.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam. Mbak Abla, apa kabar? Terima kasih.
Kepencet moodnya.
Apakah dokter pembicara dan moderator sudah dijadikan co-host?
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Dr. Aliandri.
Izin memulai ya dok, Prof.
Dokter Rainier belum datang ya?
Profesor Riner Karillo ada?
Belum masuk.
Oh, sudah ada.
Sudah ada. Hai, halo Prof.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Daftar.
Hai, Profesor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rainier.
Rainier.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Welcome to Indonesia, Professor Rainier. Yes,
By
virtual.
Even though virtual.
Hope to go there sometime. Yeah.
Of course, we are waiting for you.
Let me start the meeting, Prof.
Okay. Go, shall we go?
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let us pray and praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because of His bless and mercy, we can come together without any obstacle here with healthy condition in the third ASEAN or LHNS Federation lecture meeting. Before we start, let us greet and pray to our beloved Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who had brought us to the path of light and left the darkness in this life. The Honorable Prof. Jenny Basiruddin, MD, PhD, as President, the Indonesian Society of Otorhinolaryngology Head and Neck Surgeon. The Honorable Marlinda Adam, MD, PhD, as General Secretary, the Indonesian Society of Otorhinolaryngology Head and Neck Surgeon. The Honorable Trimartani Kunto, MD, PhD, as Head of Indonesian College of Otorhinolaryngology Head and Neck Surgeon. The Honorable Sukirman Sukin, MD, as President ASEAN or LHNS Federation. And greetings for our honorable speaker from Philippines, Professor Dr. Rainer Karillo, and my beloved friends, doctors and otorhinolaryngologists. Ladies and gentlemen, on this nice occasion, let me deliver the structure of the event today as follow: opening, and the second one is welcoming speech from President ASEAN or LHNS Federation, Sukirman Sukin, MD. And then the speech from Professor Jenny Basiruddin, MD, PhD, as President, the Indonesian Society of Otorhinolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgeon. And then the lecture meeting, which will be led by Aliandri, MD, or LHNS, as moderator. The question and answer session, and the last one is closing. Ladies and gentlemen, let's open this event by saying Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now we invite the President ASEAN or LHNS Federation, Sukirman Sukin, MD, to give welcoming speech. Please, Dr. Sukirman.
Thank you very much, Anggina. Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, clearly.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you, God. We can meet again in the meeting, even in the Zoom, but we still have healthy and happiness and all, especially all ASEAN member. And my dears, for all President of ASEAN ENT HNS Society, and also all member of ASEAN, and my dears Professor Jenny, Marlinda, Trimartani, as the chairman of the Indonesian College, and also has arranged everything, yeah, especially the Asian Committee, Indonesian Asian Committee, has arranged everything about the lecture meeting. I think it's number 4 or 3, yeah, I forgot that. And have worked together and work hard to settle of this meeting. We know it's actually we still in the COVID pandemic era. Even the COVID is lower spread to all, especially ASEAN country and maybe for all abroad. We have to more have gain about the COVID and recover together and gain, build together and go to by the new spirit of the ASEAN spirit and to work together again, even in the Zoom, still in the Zoom system. We know we can see now, we in the front of us all, we have 2 prominent speakers. First, Professor Rainier Corello from Philippines. She's very famous doctors. We're talking about the cricopharyngeal botulinum injection. Maybe the first time I hear this maybe because I'm my major in the ear, yes, not in the larynx. But I think it's the new technique also about how to manage the problem of the esophageal or larynx problem. Secondly, is my daughter Effie Zulka is the also senior ENT doctor in Indonesia University. We'll talk about the management of fish. Yeah, we know is now developed very, very fastly about the problem and how to make a diagnostic by fish. All I think is very benefit for us, especially in Indonesia maybe. So in all country, 9 country in Asia. So let's we go together to hear 2 prominent speaker. We'll talk about the management of the dysphagia. I think, thank you again for all committee. Yes, you have worked hard to settle everything about the Congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sukirman, for the speech. And now I invite Professor Jenny Basiruddin, MD, PhD, as President, the Indonesian Society of Otorhinolaryngology Head and Neck Surgeon, to give some speech. To Prof. Jenny, time and place are yours.
Thank you, Dr. Agina. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to whom I respect the President ASEAN ORL HNS Federation, Dr. Sukirman Sukin, MD ORL and HNS, the President-elect of ASEAN ORL HNS Federation, Prof. Chung Thuy Tran Pan, MD, from Vietnam, and also the Honorable guest, Professor Dr. Rainier Jose Corello, from University of Philippines, Manila, and also the another speaker, Dr. Elvi Zulka, and the moderator, and all the committee, Dr. Abla, Dr. Marlinda, and also our head of colleague, Dr. Trimartani, and all the steering committee, and all great professor, teachers, seniors, and all the participants. First of all, with the grace of Allah Almighty, all of us can have this again online meeting. This is the 3rd of ASEAN ORL HNS Federation lecture meeting So thanks God, we have already make 3 kind. And today we will have the sharing from the 2 prominent speaker about the managing dysphagia. So hopefully we all have a great benefit from this, because this is dysphagia. Also, we have many problem in about this. So as we know, then the pandemic COVID-19 has an effect, especially for ENT doctors. But thanks God, now it's manageable. Only a few the patient hospitalized, but still the ENT doctors and others doctors still get effect from the COVID-19. So before we start, let we pray together for everyone who unwell at this moment, so they can recover soon and the pandemic will be end soon. And also, before we also pray for our healthiness, and hopefully we will all the participants will enjoy this lecture. I think again, thank you very much for the speaker, Professor Dr. Rino Carrillo, Dr. Elvi Zulka, and also Dr. Aliandri as moderator. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Dr. Anggina as master of ceremony today. Thank you very much. So I think we will hear this lecture and we can enjoy all this meeting. Thank you very much, Dr. Anggina. Thank you of all.
Thank you, Prof. Jenny, for the speech. Before we continue to the main session, let us take a picture together first. Maybe all the participants can activate the video. We will take a picture together. Okay, there's 10 slides, so I will start to the first slide. Okay, please all participants activate the video. Let me count. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next one. Okay, next slide. 1, 2, 3. And then the next slide. 1, 2, 3. And the next slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay. And last slide. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, now we come into the main point. That is ASEAN or LHNS Federation lecture meeting with theme Managing Dysphagia. We already have our 2 famous speaker, Professor Rainer, and our beautiful speaker, Dr. Elvi Zulka. This lecture will be led by Aliandri, MDOR LHNS as moderator. To Dr. Aliandri, time and place are welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Anggi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's start our meeting today. The first speaker will be Dr. Elvi Zulka from University of Indonesia. She is a lecturer in endoscopy, bronchoesophageology,
Recording in progress.
otolaryngology, and head and neck department, Faculty of Medicine, University of Indonesia. She will give a lesson about fiber optic endoscopic evaluation of swallowing, a tool for diagnosis the oropharyngeal dysphagia. Dr. Elvi, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me share my screen. First of all, I'd like to thank the Committee of ICNRL for giving me the opportunity to talk in this lecture meeting. And very well welcome to Professor Rainer Kayo, and then it's nice meeting you here. And my talk is about the procedures of FIS, fiber optic endoscopy evaluation of swallowing. So the goals of this presentation is to talk about FIS, the purpose, the indication, the advantage and the limitation, and also the procedure in adult. So if we talk about dysphagia is a problem when there is a disturbance in a bolus transfer concerning the efficacy of the bolus transfer and also the safety of this transfer. So it's represent an enormous burden for patients, healthcare professionals, and also society. And it's most prevalent in the neurologic diseases such as cancer, stroke, cancers, and also children related to its prematurity, laryngomalacia, and feeding difficulties. And of course, it will lead to several severe complications, malnutrition, dehydration, and pneumonia. And of course, it will concerning the quality of life. So the early diagnosis is very important to overcome this morbidity and mortality. So as I mentioned before, there is a problem with the efficacy of bolus transfer. It's related to the transportation of the food, the saliva, and it will relate to the protection of the airway. And the second one is the safety, or the safety will, there is a problem with the aspiration. If there is an aspiration, it will lead to pneumonia, and it will lead also to the mortality and also morbidity. Apart from that, there is a problem also with nutrition. Of course, it will lead to dehydration, malnutrition, and immunity problems. So these are several problems that can be possessed in patient with the dysphagia. So if we talk about the FIS is a fiber optic or flexible endoscopic evaluation of swallowing. Actually, it can be interchanged between fiber optic and flexible. And it's also Dr. Professor Susan Lamor, first of all, will talk about FIS, and it's actually in 1988. It's an instrumental assessment to assess the oropharyngeal problem in patients with dysphagia. It utilizes a rhinolaryngoscope with the camera, and also give release. We can see this larynx. The larynx can be identified because the hypopharynx is the crossroad between the airway and also the digestive system. So very important to identify a problem with that kind of area. So if there is aspiration, it will lead us to the so-called pneumonia. So FIS is actually developed in 1988, as I mentioned before, and now is currently become a second most common diagnostics tool in the world. It can replace the video fluoroscopic swallowing study because of several advantages of that FIS. And also FIS we introduce several kind of food or liquid that can be given to the patient, from the simple ones such as a puree gastric rise and Havermouth, and also with the thick and thin consistency, that's quite difficult for patient to chew or to digest, so to make a bolus from that. So it's really related to the aspiration. So what is the purpose of FEES? Is actually to manage the airway protection, to see whether the airway there's a problem with the airway, so we can avoid pneumonia. And we also can choose the suitable food consistency that can be tolerated by patient, and with the swallowing maneuver after that, because swallowing maneuver is important to protect the airway. And we can also apply the suitable delivery method. And then, of course, at the end, it will improving patient quality of life. So what is the indication of FEES? Actually, the indication is alteration in the nasopharyngeal or pharyngeal or anatomy. If there is a problem with sensory integrity in the pharynx and in the laryngeal structures, or if the patient have inability to initiate to maintain airway secretion protection. If there is a high risk of aspiration, we can also using FEES to assess how severe is the aspiration, as well to assess the pharyngeal contraction. Nowadays, the indication will extend to head and neck tumors. Usually, head and neck tumors also suffer from dysphagia, and also following that, head and neck cancer patient having radiotherapy and chemotherapy that interfere with the constriction of the pharyngeal section region, and patient and neuromuscular problem, patient with geriatric with the multiple comorbidities. And now is the indication of stroke, because stroke is currently happening all around the world, and a stroke is related to the ICU setting, stroke related to the ventilation, and is related to the intubation. So as we know that after the intubation, 48 hours after the intubation, even though the patient has not suffered from stroke, it will impair the feeding ability. It will lead to dysphagia, and after the intubation, so the patient also have a tracheostomy to maintain the secretion, and of course the tracheostomy itself also causing dysphagia. So it's very important to emphasize the FEES indication in stroke, in intubation, in the ICU setting, in also patient assessment prior to tracheostomy decannulation. Don't forget with the laryngopharyngeal reflux, and also children with feeding problems. So what is the advantage of FEES? Because actually FEES compared to the video fluoroscopy as a gold standard, FEES now is considered a gold standard. We can identify the gold blood vessel and allow for visualization of the pharyngeal and also laryngeal anatomy, and also can also assess secretion management, less expensive, it's portable, can be in bedside, and also in children can assess bedside can assess the breastfeeding mother with the breastfeeding. And the rare side effect is discomfort, quite discomfort, and then sometimes nosebleed and gagging, and but it's really a small portion of the patient can have laryngospasm and also facial reflex. The limitation is some of the limitation is we cannot identify the upper esophageal sphincter opening, exactly the diameter, and only assess indirectly the oral phase, and also we cannot identify the pharyngeal pressure. So usually we assess FEES in the outpatient clinic, and it's very important that the patient position upright. And then if there is a weakness in the patient, we can put something like pillow in the torso, in the arm. So it means that we have to put the patient in the upright position, because once patient position is not really in proper position, it will give false negative or false positive findings. Then we introduce several consistency, such as puree and gastric rise. In our institution, we initiate with puree, gastric rise, and hover mode is more thick, is more sticky hover mode. And then we also introduce thick liquid and also thin liquid is dyed with green food coloring. And we also must identify three stages. First stage is a pre-swallowing assessment. Consists of evaluation the oromotor activity. And the second stage is actually the swallowing assessment. We identify residues such as aspiration, penetration, aspiration with the food. And the third is a therapeutic assessment with the help of physical rehabilitation doctors that will improve the patient ability to swallow. From this, we also have to remember that there is several parameters that should be identified. One is standing secretion here. After the patient swallow, we can see whether there is a pre-swallowing leakage or a premature spillage. Then we see the remaining residue of the patient of the food, whether it's in the above the focal cord. We can see that this is called the penetration, or below the focal cord, it's called aspiration. And we also have to assess the session and the cough respect to the patient. So at the beginning, we can see that there is a pre-swallowing assessment. We see that there is a buccal. We can see the lip seal, whether the patient can close the lips quite normal, or we have to check whether there is tongue movement, is there any limitation of tongue movement, and then we can see the pharyngeal arc, whether the pharyngeal arc symmetrically or asymmetrically, and also we can also identify whether the patient has always opened the mouth. Once the patient open the mouth, then it can have a problem with the jaw, because if there is a problem with the jaw control, of course, the patient cannot have a proper oral phase. This is actually the valve of the sixth valve that are very important for swallowing. The first valve, as I mentioned, is the lip. We have to see the patient whether the patient can close the lips. We call that the lip seal. And the second one is the tongue. The patient has to move the tongue, has to have a quite mobile tongue, because if there's a problem with the tongue propulsion, there will be problem in initiating swallowing. The third one, we have to see the pharyngeal arch, whether the pharyngeal arch can asymmetrical or non-symmetrical. It's related also with the fourth one. We call that the failure pharyngeal sphincter. If there's a problem with that, usually in patient with stroke, there is a failure pharyngeal incompetence. We can identify bolus of food in the nasopharyngeal region. And this one is the larynx. We can identify from the larynx is actually the standing secretion, and it's usually accompanied by wet sounding voice because of the standing secretion around the laryngeal vestibule. And the last one is the cricopharyngeal segment, that the one that Professor Carrillo will talk about that with the botulinum toxin injection. So you can see that this is the incompetence of the pharyngeal fault. If we can ask the patient to say beep, 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 beep. If there's a contraction, the normal one, it will close. If there is a problem, there will be incompetence in here. It means the patient have a probability of a nasal regurgitation, and of course there is a problem also with the voice. And we can see whether the contraction is here, like a concentric, or in the anterior posterior direction. So we can identify that, and we have to see also the gap. The larger the gap, the more probability to get regurgitation. And then we have to see the assessment also with the larynx. We can identify problem with that, whether there is a paralysis, whether there is a problem with the vocal cords, the function, and also we see the gap in the vocal cord. If there is a gap, it means that the problem with the glottic closure that increase the likelihood of aspiration. We have to see also the epiglottic, whether the epiglottic is stiff or the epiglottic quite floppy, because once it's stiff, this actually have a protection. It's like a blessing in disguise, because it will prevent the aspiration into the lower airway. There is several problem that can be identified. One is the standing secretion. The standing secretion can be assessed by Murray's secretion scale. The normal one is like a clear, a very thin. Once the patient swallow, then it's gone. Once there is a problem with the outside lineal vestibule, we can have to identify in one, we can see that there is a minimum of the secretion there. But if there is a problem with this laryngeal vestibule, there is a penetration and then the penetration and aspiration with a consistent pulling even after swallow, we can grade this into grade 3, Murray's severity scale, Murray's secretion scale. But if there is in between 1 and 3, we can see that after repeated swallowing, their pull is decreased, but there will be identified is still in the laryngeal vestibule. And then the one that we have to check after the standing secretion, Murray's secretion scale, we have to identify the pharyngeal squeeze maneuver. Actually, it was introduced by Bastian. It's a muscular contraction during voicing, like I pitch something like that, and actually it will narrow the resonating lumen. Here, this is the normal one, lumen, and after the production of and then it will be narrow here, and we can see there's contact between the posterior wall into the arytenoid and then the epiglottic. But if the patient with stroke, there will be a problem with that. This is the beginning of the stroke. And this is only on the left side that is contracted. Actually, it's quite simple if the patient is cooperative. Basically, it's assess the narrow of the resonating lumen and also with shortening of the pharynx. Actually, we can see the function of the muscle, like a constrictor muscle in superior, medial, inferior for narrowing a pharynx, and also shortening the pharynx is the longitudinal muscle. So after secretion, pharyngeal squeeze, then we have to assess the sensation by a touch test. Touch test is like briefly introduce our scope because we don't have FIS. FIS is sensory stimulation testing. So we just introduce the scope into this arytenoid here on the epiglottis, on the tip of that. Then we observe whether the patient cough or we can see also the adduction of the vocal cord. So basically, with pre-swallowing assessment, we have to check all of them: sensitivity, pharyngeal squeeze, and also touch. And see if there is a problem with that. If there is a secretion, such in the Murray's sensitivity scale 3, then we have to look here in this patient. Patient suffer from, I think, yes, the stroke. So in the beginning, we have to see whether there is a lip seal, yeah. And then we assess the tongue. Then we can see that it's the Murray's severity scale 3. For this, we can perform, we call that the ice chip protocol. The ice chip protocol is the indication if we see that patient has a poor secretion management and the poor performance for trial. So it's your patient. So we have to do that more cautious in giving patient with a more solid food. So it's actually giving a small amount of ice chip, 1 or 2. If we see the result, if there is no swallow initiation, if there is silent aspiration, if there is an unsuccessful attempt of clearing the bolus, or if there is excessive coughing and shortness of breath or decrease in fetal sign, then we have to stop and we have to stop the procedures, and then we don't proceed with the food, the more thick food, more food that's really will give a problem in get rid of that residue after following the FIS examination. So it has to be done in patient with the poor secretion management. So following the pre-swallowing assessment and ice chip, if it's a problem with the patient, we can proceed with direct assessment of swallowing food or liquid. Usually we introduce a variety of food, liquid, and with a few drops of dye, and start with the easiest consistency, that is a puree, and then move to next consistency. So we can see the residue, we identify the penetration and also the aspiration. see, as I mentioned before, the standing stagnation can identify by pre-swallowing assessment, but after the procedure, then we can proceed with the food, then we identify the pre-swallowing leakage, the residue, the penetration, and also the aspiration. So we can see that where is the location of the residue is very important, because whether the residue stay in the valvula here or the residue in this sinus piriform, the piriform sinus here. So how much or how severe the residue is also will give a clue or will help the physical rehabilitation doctors to give patient maneuver and to also to facilitate the swallow with the special equipment such as neuromuscular electrical stimulation. So how does the patient react to the residue, whether it's tough or throat clearing? And we have to see in this second session of FIST. This is the real pharyngeal residue rating scale. Then actually we see the residue in the valvula, whether it's none or a trace amount here, 1 until 5%, or mild, where is the 5 until 25%. We can see the ligamentum epiglottic is still visible, and moderate when it's like 25 until 50%, and more than that, when the residue is really filling the epiglottic rim. So this is the valvula, where the problem usually lies in the constrictor pharynx. And the second one is we have to identify in the piriform sinus. The definition of severity also the same, but is see that if the waterfall is called mild, 5 until 25%, moderate is like 25 to 50%, is more than that severe, it will feel the other epiglottic fold. Problem with this, the piriform sinus is usually relates to the decrease in laryngeal elevation, and also there is a problem with the upper esophageal sphincter. So this is the penetration, is above the glottic rim, and the aspiration below. But we have to really precise in describing the penetration aspiration. Yeah, there is Rosenbeck actually introduced this to video fluoroscopy swallowing study. But Kalatny has repeated this with FIST. So with FIST, we can also identify the penetration aspiration with the penetration aspiration scale. So we can see that in the first, score 1, it means that is normal. But if there is a problem with score 2 until 5, it means there is a penetration in the laryngeal vestibule, but remain above the vocal cords, on contact the vocal cords, and we have to identify whether it's injected from the airway or not. But if there is a pass below the vocal cord, we call that the aspiration. We think that is a severe one. So we have to anytime identify whether there is ejected from the airway, non-ejected, or there is no effort is made. We call that there is a silent aspiration. The severe dysphagia, that it needs to have really maybe for that severe aspiration, we have to identify whether the cricopharyngeal region that really contributes to the problem, or the sensitivity, and also the constrictor pharynx itself. So it really have to be precise. See, there's aspiration can cause by several problems. It can happen in three occasions. First is before patients swallow. It means that there is a problem with the impaired laryngeal reflex, for example. And there is a during swallowing. If there is a during swallowing, there is an impairment in glottic posture. And after swallowing is related to the unilateral or also bilateral paralysis, or also the cricopharyngeal sphincter problem. So that in this lecture, I have to remind that there is a problem with before aspiration, during aspiration, and after swallowing. If we examine the patient, we have to identify it, and because we have to say it in this report. So because it will interfere with the treatment. So what is the FIST dysphagia score? If mild, it means that pre-swallowing leakage or prematous spillage, and no residue, no penetration, aspiration, such in PAS 1 or PAS 2. and moderate dysphagia if there is penetration or aspiration with one consistency. In the severe one, the penetration aspiration with two or more consistency. This is an example of myasthenia MG patient. 15 or 40% MG has dysphagia, and residue reported as the main finding with the predominant in the palate. It means that the problem with the muscle, with the constrictor variant. And there is also problem with the primatobolus spirit because of the tongue, the muscle of the tongue that also impair swallowing reflex. Here you can see this is a patient with this MG. And we also just like to remind that there's a check the vocal tone, and the tongue movement, and then in this patient, the patient has quite good mobility in the tongue. And then we inserted the scope, and then we see the velar-pharynx section here. The anteroposterior, like put sound p p p p, and then we move downward. See, there's the secretion. It's the step one of assessing. One is see that there is more a severity scale or secretion scale 3, where there is a patient is difficult for patient to clear out of the secretion after a couple of tests. Then we ask the patient to do pharyngeal squeeze. See, there is no contact between the posterior wall with the arytenoid or the epiglottic, so it's quite a minimum pharyngeal squeeze. Then we proceed with this touch test. We see that there is a problem, whether there is a problem with laryngeal adductor reflex here. Okay, that's quite there is a minimal laryngeal adductor reflex. Then we introduce the food. This is the puree. So it see that there's a couple of attempts for the patient to clear out of the secretion. That is like 50% of a residue. So it means the Yale classification, the highest one. And then sometimes you can see there's the opening of the upper esophageal sphincters there. And then when we introduce the thin liquid, this is a very difficult one because to control. So in this patient, we see there's a risk of penetration of aspiration in this patient. The last one is usually thick liquid. So this is actually the same patient. This is actually the same patient after the treatment. After the treatment, the patient passed to feast examination. Then we have to proceed with we call that fatigable swallowing test. It actually challenges the patient to swallow repeatedly, swallowing trials. Then repeatedly swallowing will lead to pharyngeal residue. So if we see, it's like 30 times swallow. Once we introduce, usually we introduce bread with a 2 by 1 centimeters. We ask the patient to swallow 30 times. Yeah, 30 times of introduction of the kind of food. So we see whether the patient has a fatigability of swallowing. So it actually will give information to the neurologists, the treatment, whether the treatment will improve the swallowing ability. Now is the patient with the motor neuron disease. This is the patient with the motor neuron disease with oropharyngeal dysphagia. Of course, with the motor neuron disease, there is a complication of pneumonia. It's really about 60-70%, existing 20% is due to aspiration. See, this is the more aspiration scale 2, where it's gone after repeated swallowing. Then we also pharyngeal squeeze and also touch test. The pharyngeal squeeze is excellent. See, there is a narrow of the oropharyngeal cavity. After that, it means that the function of the constrictor pharynx is quite good, and also the longitudinal muscle. And then we check the laryngeal adductor reflex. It's also give a positive response. Then we give the patient puree, and see there is a pre-swallowing liquid, the premature spillage, but it's is nearly gone in a second. So there is no residue. Following that, only a mild one. So actually, the patient is give a quite is a really good his result. Is considered to have moderate because there's a problem with the handling thick liquid in this patient. So one more that we have to remember is the standardized endoscopic swallowing evaluation for tracheostomy decanulation of CSF. Is the three aspects that should be identified. One is the secretion management. Two is the spontaneous swallowing response. Usually we swallow if 1 minute. We have 3 times. The frequency of swallowing in 1 minute is like 3 times in 1 minute. But in patient with the problem with tracheostomy, actually, we see whether the patient have swallow every 1 minute. It's like two in 2 minutes, and we also evaluate the laryngeal sensitivity. Okay? So it actually 3 aspects. One is secretion management. Second is spontaneous swallowing response, and evaluating laryngeal sensitivity with laryngeal auditory with touch test. If the patient can have a score is a good score with that, then we can decanulate the patient tracheostomy here. See that the secretion management is the first thing that we have to identify, because once the patient cannot manage the secretion, it means the aspiration still there, and then the risk of pneumonia is still there. So you see that the patient only one swallow, and the secretion management is poor, one swallow, and then we have to wait another swallow whether the patient can pass. Actually, this has to be run in order. Once the patient have a very good secretion management, then we count the swallowing twice in 2 minutes, and we perform the laryngeal test. It's just to show that the patient has to be in tracheostomy because it's poor management of the secretion and a low swallowing ability. Okay. So part 3 actually is with our colleague visually, the physical rehabilitation doctor. He can do the compulsory techniques that head turn, chin tuck, side lying, or also dry swallowing or breath hold maneuver. And we also can initiate the rehabilitation on compulsory like evacuate swallowing and Mendes maneuver.
Juanda Makassar.
We can also advise the patient to have a suitable consistency that is safe during swallowing. So in conclusion, this is a widely known safe procedure to diagnose oropharyngeal dysphagia. It has the ability to visual the larynx and can be done bedside, and also has the ability to provide information, by feedback to physical rehabilitation doctor, to our partner, and it can be done repeatedly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Elvi Zulka. A very nice presentation. We have a nice lesson from Dr. Elvi Zulka. And the next will be presented by Professor Dr. Rainer Carrillo. He is a professor of College of Medicine in University of Philippines, Manila. Now he is a section chief of laryngology and bronchoesophagology. Dr. Professor Rainer Carrillo will present cricopharyngeal botulinum injection. Professor Rainer Carrillo, the time is yours.
May I request the host to show the YouTube video? Thank you.
You are already co-host, Professor Rainer Carrillo.
Okay, so I'll share the YouTube video. Okay, thank you. I thought the host can share it. I'll open the YouTube video.
I'm sorry, Dr. Rainer, you're still on mute.
Yes, sorry, I'll share the video. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, very clear.
Yes, clearly.
Lecture on cricopharyngeal botulinum infection. I hope it's loud enough. Sorry. Is intended for otolaryngologists, head and neck surgeons, training, and students. I'll pause for a while. Is it clear? Is the video audio clear?
Not clear enough.
Not clear enough. Okay. For this lecture, I have nothing to disclose. These are coverage. Will include anatomy and physiology.
Sorry, Dr. Rainer is still on unmute mute program, so maybe you can unmute because we cannot hear the sound.
Oh, wait for a while. I'll fix this. More. Share sound. I'll repeat. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to lecture on cricopharyngeal botulinum injection. This one? Okay. This lecture. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to lecture on cricopharyngeal botulinum injection. Can I ask the host? Is it clear already? This lecture is intended for otolaryngologists, head and neck surgeons, trainees, and students. For this lecture, I have nothing to disclose. This is our coverage. It will include anatomy and physiology of the cricopharyngeal muscle, a review of pediatric and adult larynx and the phases of swallowing, the basic symptoms in the outpatient clinic and ward referrals, cricopharyngeal disorder and representative myogenic. I'll pause for a while. Dr. LB,
Yes.
I apologize for this. Is the audio clear when I play the video YouTube?
I think the sound is quite. I cannot hear that perfectly.
Okay. Is the host able to play the YouTube link I provided before so that they may play the YouTube
Yeah.
and increase the volume. So wait.
Yeah. Hang on a second.
Dr. LB.
I try to share the YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm? Yeah. Boleh ya? Is it the volume?
Maybe Professor Carello can give some explanation.
Okay. I'll share screen again and play the original video. I apologize. Share screen. This one. Let's see. Play. Hello everyone. Thank you for allowing me to lecture on cricopharyngeal botulinum injections. This lecture is intended for otolaryngologists, head and neck surgeons, trainees, and students. For this lecture, I have nothing to disclose. This is our coverage. It will include anatomy and physiology of the cricopharyngeal muscle, a review. Is it clear?
It's clearer now, but still not not enough volume. Maybe I think.
It's this one.
The sound volume is not very clear. Quite. Maybe all of us can increase the volume of our gadgets or computer.
Hello everyone. Thank you for allowing me to lecture on cricopharyngeal botulinum injection. This lecture is intended for otolaryngologists, head and neck surgeons, trainees, and students. For this lecture, I have nothing to disclose. This is our coverage. It will include anatomy and physiology of the cricopharyngeal muscle, a review of pediatric and adult larynx. I'll pause for a while. I'll do it live. Okay, sorry. Share screen, PowerPoint. Hello everyone. Thank you for allowing me to lecture on cricopharyngeal botulinum injection. For this lecture, I have nothing to disclose. This is the laryngopharynx or the hypopharynx is bounded posteriorly by the inferior constrictor. And the inferior constrictor consists of the thyropharyngeus and the cricopharyngeus. The cricopharyngeus muscle originates from the cricoid cartilage and inserts to a median raphe. Now, the cricopharyngeus
Better now.
is it okay? Is it
Yeah.
loud enough?
Yeah,
It's
it's better
always
now.
on a contracted state. It opens up during swallowing. And because of this circular nature of the cricopharyngeus, it serves as the main component of the upper esophageal sphincter. The pharyngeal phase key structures for a good swallowing function requires a functioning motor and sensory cortex, a functional cerebellum for coordination, and intact glossopharyngeal, vagus, and hypoglossal nerves. In the pharyngeal phase of swallowing, there is laryngeal elevation, palatal and laryngeal closure, tongue retraction, coordinated pharyngeal squeeze, and cricopharyngeal relaxation. While everything seems to contract, the cricopharyngeus must relax. The main differences between pediatric and adult oral cavity pharynx and larynx with respect to swallowing are: the pediatric has a smaller tongue, a shorter larynx, a relatively longer epiglottis that's almost abutting the soft palate, and this allows the pediatric to be able to breathe while swallowing, especially during breastfeeding. While there are several differences between the adult and the pediatric oropharynx, The cricopharyngeus in general remains closed and must relax during the act of swallowing. These are the phases of swallowing. We have the oral phase, the pharyngeal phase, and the esophageal phase. The oral phase consists of preparatory phase, part of which includes chewing, and with chewing, some of the food particles that are transmitted into the oropharynx will elicit some form of cueing. The cueing will result to relative preparedness for the pharynx to receive the bolus of food coming from the oral cavity. Now, with the oral propulsive phase, the anterior tongue will propel the food backwards into the oropharynx. Now, the pharyngeal phase is involuntary. It's usually 1 second. In fees, it is the whiteout. Okay. Now, the pharyngeal phase will consist of soft palate elevation to close the nasopharynx and food will not regurgitate into the nose. Okay. Laryngeal elevation, and with laryngeal elevation, the epiglottis will close the larynx. The arytenoids will adduct, and doing so, the false vocal fold and the true vocal folds will also close. Now, during the pharyngeal phase, the base of tongue will propel the food from the oropharynx down into the hypopharynx, with the aid of the constrictors propelling the food downwards. At the last part of the pharyngeal phase, the cricopharyngeus, acting as the main portion of your upper esophageal sphincter, must relax. Okay. Failing to do so will result to pooling of food in the oropharynx and the hypopharynx, and when the time comes when the person has to breathe, okay, the larynx has to open, the food in the oropharynx and the hypopharynx may be aspirated by the patient. Some of the chief complaints or referral to ENT are globus sensation or lump in the throat, and these are not always LPR or goiter. Other reasons for consultation are dysphagia to either solids or liquids, difficulty in burping, choking sensation, recurrent aspiration and pneumonia. For some children, they are being referred for swallowing evaluation because of failure to thrive, recurrent pneumonia, and dyspnea. For the purpose of this lecture, I will limit the indication of cricopharyngeal management to pathologies involving propulsive issues, mainly in neurogenic and myogenic etiologies of cricopharyngeal dysphagia. In practice, the greatest challenge is to how to improve the quality of life by having a safe airway and a safe swallow. While tracheostomy and gastric tubes allow respiration and nutrition respectively, improving and restoring oropharyngeal drainage should provide a good quality of life. The cricopharynx must relax during the pharyngeal phase of swallowing. When the food reaches the oropharynx and the hypopharynx, the constrictors in the base of tongue will propel the food downwards, and the cricopharynx must relax for the food to go down into the esophagus. Now, in cricopharyngeal achalasia, there is failure of relaxation of the cricopharyngeus muscle. Consequence of this is that the food in the hypopharynx may be pulled, okay, and aspirated when the patient is about to breathe and this is the case in both pediatric and adult patients suffering from cricopharyngeal achalasia. Now, in oropharyngeal dysphagia leading to aspiration, there are several possible mechanisms. One is there's failure of the larynx to protect itself. For example, there's failure of laryngeal elevation, failure of the epiglottis and the vocal cords, true and the false vocal cords to close the laryngeal inlet. And when the food bolus is about to go down from the pharynx to pass through the cricopharynx, a patent larynx will result to aspiration during the pharyngeal phase. In retrograde cricopharyngeal dysfunction, there's failure of the cricopharyngeus to relax during belching. Okay, when, for example, a person has to burp, like after eating, okay, or after swallowing, some of the swallowed air has to be burped in order to decompress the stomach and the esophagus. Failure of the cricopharyngeus to relax is called your retrograde cricopharyngeal dysfunction. Now, the mechanism by which we can improve and bypass these pathologies is to keep the cricopharyngeus open with the hope that there's facilitation of transfer of food from the oropharynx, the hypopharynx, down to the esophagus, even with limited uh, pharyngeal closure or pharyngeal squeeze, okay, and with limited coordination of these muscles. And with facilitated transfer of food from the oropharynx, hypopharynx down to the esophagus, we hope that there will be a good nutrition and a safe airway during the regular swallowing. Of course, there are other ways to enhance the swallowing, and with the help of our rehabilitation medicine and our speech and swallowing and language pathologists, we are able to rehabilitate our patients with cricopharyngeal dysfunction. You can equate the oropharyngeal dysphagia to flooding, and by decreasing food boluses and controlling saliva, we may decrease the chance of flooding in the pharynx. We facilitate nutrition through nasogastric tube or a gastrostomy, and for unsafe airway, tracheostomy allows pulmonary toilet for aspirators and recurrent pneumonia cases. However, another option is to keep the cricopharyngeus open. It is like a persistently open floodgate, and this will facilitate the drainage of the food, saliva, or other liquid pooling in the oropharynx and the hypopharynx to drain directly into the esophagus. Of course, maneuvers should be done in order to prevent a reflux into the oropharynx from food particles and food coming from the stomach and the esophagus. One very good candidate for oropharyngeal rehabilitation is idiopathic inflammatory myositis. This set of autoimmune disease attacks the skeletal muscles, resulting to weakness not only of the extremities but also the muscles for swallowing. And there are three diseases under the IIM. These are the dermatomyositis, inclusion body myositis, and polymyositis. Now, these patients will generally present with dysphagia and extremity weakness, and they have reduced pharyngeal contractility, cricopharyngeal dysfunction, reduced laryngeal elevation, in esophageal dysmotility. For these patients to be good candidate for botulinum injection of the cricopharynx, as well as possible myotomy, I would suggest that establishment of esophageal motility and patency be done by video fluoroscopic swallowing studies or modified barium swallow. And should there be no pooling in the esophagus, facilitating cricopharyngeal relaxation will result to improve oropharyngeal function. Another candidate case for cricopharyngeal botulinum injection is abelcha or inability to burp. This disease is characterized by retrosternal pain after eating or drinking, bloated stomach, throat gurgling noise, and excessive flatulence. A one-time botulinum injection allows for improvement of symptoms without recurrence. For this reason, the botulinum may have a direct effect or may have facilitated restoration of retrograde function. Remember, being able to burp is very important. Okay? Otherwise, this will result to accumulation of gas in the esophagus, the stomach, and eventually the distal portions of the gastrointestinal tract. There are scenarios when cricopharyngeal botulinum injection failed to improve swallowing, as in the initially diagnosed case of cricopharyngeal dysphagia. The working impression was changed to cricopharyngeal dystonia after noticing that the patient did not improve with botulinum injection. The patient was then treated with trihexyphenidyl to improve salivation and control salivation, clonazepam and gabapentin to improve neural function. And again, in this case, the botulinum injection test perhaps was used as a diagnostic test serendipitously. Still, the most common candidate for cricopharyngeal botulinum injection are patients referred for swallowing rehabilitation because of brain injury from vascular disease and trauma. There are several brands and several preparations of botulinum injection, botulinum toxins. There are Botox, Dysport, and Xomine and Hengley. Of course, these are of different potency, and occasionally different brands may unmask different neurologic features and side effects. The good thing about botulinum injection is that the effects are usually transient. Usually, the effect of the botulinum is going to fade in 3 to 6 months, such that for cricopharyngeal dysfunction, should there be an improvement of swallowing, a repeated botulinum injection is offered after 3 to 6 months, or a formal cricopharyngeal myotomy via laser or an external approach. There are several administered and self-administered dysphagia assessment tool. Uh, Here is an example of the EAT-10 questionnaire, and this is a 10-item validated questionnaire to evaluate and score the ability of the patient to swallow. The technique of cricopharyngeal botulinum injection simply requires botulinum toxin administered after cricopharyngeal exposure using a standard rigid esophagoscope or a diverticuloscope, or perhaps a laryngoscope, dilating laryngoscope like the Virda laryngoscope. Now, the usual botulinum toxin used is the botulinum type A, and this is very readily available, and this is usually used for other indications like treatment of wrinkles. So, the botulinum injection is prepared in the usual dilution, recommended dilution, and for cricopharyngeal injection, the dose is usually around 40 to 100 units injected into the cricopharynx posterior portion at three several points. This can be delivered through a butterfly syringe or a long needle, and facilitated by visualization is facilitated using a 0-degree Hopkins scope. Complications from cricopharyngeal botulinum injection may be divided into instrument-related. These are the injury to the throat and the tongue brought about by the esophagoscope, the laryngoscope, or the diverticuloscope. Dental complications like chipped tooth or dental pain, and rarely tongue lacerations or pharyngeal lacerations, especially for class 2 occlusions or retrognathia and micrognathia cases. Now, injection site related, this can be hoarseness from diffusion of botulinum injection from the cricopharynx to the intrinsic muscles of the larynx. Now, if the cricopharyngeus is patent, naturally there's always that risk of laryngopharyngeal reflux and a hyperactive airway that may result to laryngospasm or a choking sensation. Hopefully, this can be controlled by patient positioning, diet modification, and some proton pump inhibitors. Now, distant adverse reactions, question mark is the possible effect into the salivary glands. Okay. Coughing and choking sensation and dyspnea for some patients. Now, what are the antidote for botulinum adverse drug reaction or adverse event? Okay, pyridostigmine and perhaps antitoxin. But antitoxin is usually used for botulism, and this is not readily available. Is adverse reaction from botulinum injection reversible? First and foremost, ADR from botulinum injection is different from botulism. Localized injection may result to diffusion of botulinum to adjacent structures or distant structures. Sometimes, botulinum injection may unmask some other inherent related neuromuscular dysfunction. Nevertheless, what has been tried is pyridostigmine, which can be given intravenously and orally, and this decreases the turnaround of acetylcholine as neurotransmitter by inhibiting acetylcholinesterase. Pyridostigmine is a treatment for myasthenia gravis. Just a caution though, the side effect of this drug is the production of saliva. In cricopharyngeal dysphagia, barium swallow and esophagogram and/or BFSS usually demonstrates retention of food bolus in the hypopharynx and oropharynx, and in a flexible endoscopic evaluation of swallowing, it is shown that there is a uh, retention of food in the vallecula and piriform sinuses, and there is a potential penetration and aspiration. So this patient underwent esophagoscopy and there is Botox injection at the posterior portion of the cricopharyngeus. At 3 sites, injection of Botox was done to have a total of 40 units. Now, there was less pooling of saliva 4 days post Botox injection, and the patient experienced less difficulty in swallowing, but the maximum or the peak effect of the botulinum injection is experienced 7 days post botulinum injection. Of course, the effect of the botulinum injection is transient, and in 3 to 6 months, the botulinum will wear off. The next step would be to offer the same procedure, botulinum injection again, or a formal myotomy in order to have a more lasting relaxation of the pharynx. To summarize, cricopharyngeal dysphagia can be evaluated using flexible scopes, particularly when doing flexible endoscopic evaluation of swallowing, and fluoroscopy studies like modified barium swallow or video fluoroscopic swallowing studies. Now, a swallowing score tool can be used in order to have more or less a before and after results. Now, should there be improvement in swallowing, the effects of the botulinum injection is expected to go down on the 3rd to 6th month post-injection. And having said that, the patient should be advised on the expectations and perhaps future repeated injections, if not a formal cricopharyngeal myotomy using laser or open approaches. It's important to rehearse with your assistant the steps in doing laryngoscopy or esophagoscopy depending on the instruments available, and when injecting your botulinum injection or botulinum toxin, okay, so that there will be less spillage and more accurate injection sites. Okay, and it's also important uh, to simulate, especially when dealing with children or adult patients with potential airway compromise. Thank you for listening to the lecture on cricopharyngeal botulinum injection, and hopefully we can offer this procedure to our patients suffering from oropharyngeal and cricopharyngeal dysphagia. And we hope that while we may not always cure, hopefully we can comfort always our patients and offer good quality of life. Thank you very much. I hope you hear the lecture well, and for those who weren't able to hear much, I think I provided the link for the YouTube video in the chat thread. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Carrillo. Let's proceed to the next discussion. For all participants who would like to ask Professor Carrillo or Dr. Elfizuka, type your answer on chat. There's some question. The first is from Dr. Hendra Yudi. Dr. Hendra Yudi would like to ask, what is the best time to evaluate patient with dysphagia? is there any guidelines or timeline to best evaluate this stage? Maybe this question will answered first by Dr. Evis Julka and could be added by Professor Carrillo as well. Please, Dr. Elvi.
Thank you very much for the questions. Actually, we have to check. We have to check whether the patient has dysphagia or not as soon as possible. Prof. Carrillo mentioned about IT10. IT10 is actually a powerful tool to screen dysphagia. We can ask the patient whether the problem with swallowing liquids, solid or pills, or whether there is a problem when the patient having meals or pain during swallowing or cough during swallowing. And also there is a question whether there is a problem with the weight problem. Actually, by using apply the question IT10 as a screen, we can identify the probability of dysphagia because the result, I think, is 3 or more than 2. It really the score that patient has suspected dysphagia. So following that, we can assess in Indonesia, we use FIS for examination, and lately we also have a collaboration with the radiology department, so we can do a video fluoroscopy swallowing study. That's maybe my comment.
Thank you, Dr. Fizulka. We would like to hear from Professor Carrillo. What is the best time to evaluate patient with dysphagia? Is there any guidelines or timeline to best evaluate dysphagia? This is the question from Dr. Hendra Yudi. Please, Prof. Carrillo.
Yes, that's a very important question. So, when do we involve other services, particularly from the standpoint of neurology or gastro? Or when do they involve the ENT? Or when do they involve the speech and language pathologist or the rehab? So the best time really is at the start of patient admission. Okay, when the patient starts to have some difficulty of swallowing. When do we start assessing dysphagia? We start when we can do it safely. Okay, so the way to do it is to, we don't do harm. We avoid letting the patient aspirate in the process of evaluating swallowing. So, as previously lectured by Dr. LB, that you can start with ice chip protocol should the patient be on history not able to tolerate liquid or solid food. Okay, because if you aspirate ice chips, so what? It will just melt in the airway. So I believe that each institution will have their own protocol. And the good thing about these evaluations, I think we can always repeat it. Okay, and we can always stop if the procedure is already dangerous.
Thank you, Professor Carrillo. Thank you, Dr. Elvi Zulka. I hope your answer your speech could answer the question from Dr. Hendra Yudi. The next question is from, excuse me. Is from Dr. Aris Rahmanda. Excuse me. Dr. Aris Rahmanda would ask Dr. Zulka. He would ask about what are the advantages of video fluoroscopy swallowing study. When should we choose the use of video fluoroscopy swallowing study instead of FIS? Please, Dr. Elvi.
Thank you for that interesting questions. because FIS is the examination to see mostly the pharyngeal region of swallowing. So because as Prof. Kayo mentioned about the three phase of swallowing, the oral phase, pharyngeal phase, and esophageal phase, actually FIS only directly measuring the pharyngeal phase. So if the patient has a problem with the definitely with oral phase that we cannot identify with FIS, actually FIS indirectly can assess the oral phase by examining the premature leakage, for example, or by predicting from the tongue mobility of the patient, buccal tone, lip seal, pharyngeal arc, for example. But if we still cannot identify what's wrong in the oral phase, or maybe we want to take a look whether the aspiration is really because of the oral phase, we can proceed with the video fluoroscopy swallowing study. So we want to know whether the tongue movement or tongue mobility is really disturbed in that patient. Apart from that, maybe a video fluoroscopy swallowing study will identify, as the Prof. Kayo mentioned, about the CP, cricopharyngeal region, that we cannot identify precisely. Only we can see from the residue in this sinus, piriform sinus, or we can see the aspiration after swallowing. With the CP bar or CP problem, that the best how we best identify that is with the video fluoroscopy swallowing. So maybe that's Prof. Kayo will add some answers. Thank you.
Yeah, please, Prof. Karela.
The good thing about fluoroscopic swallowing studies is that you'll be able to evaluate that the whiteout portion of the swallowing when you do the FIS. That's something you don't see anything in the FIS, but in fluoroscopic studies, you're able to see is there aspiration, is there a regurgitation, or is there adequate flow of the food from the oropharynx, hypopharynx down to the esophagus. And at the same time, you're able to assess motility of the esophagus. For example, we only address the oropharynx, hypopharynx, and the cricopharynx, but without taking into consideration motility of the esophagus, then the food will just go back if the food is not moving. So if the esophagus is not moving. So that's the advantage of video fluoroscopic swallowing studies. It can evaluate several levels, several points where there's a potential problem in swallowing, down to the level of the lower esophageal sphincter.
Thank you, Professor Karela. Let's proceed to the next question. This from Dr. Dimas Priyantono. He would like to ask Dr. Elvi Zulka, what are the best assessment protocols accessible for neonatal swallowing assessment? Please, Dr. Elvi Zulka.
Thank you very much. Even though I'm not talking about babies, FIS there, but quite intriguing in neonatal because we cannot examine the baby and take the baby. Usually neonatal means like premature babies. We cannot take the premature babies into the radiologic ward to have a video fluoroscopy swallowing study. So the best so far is actually to take a look at with the FIS examination, especially in neonatal, the premature baby that usually have a problem with the cardiorespiratory in the beginning or syndrome, or maybe there is a problem also with the gastrointestinal. So after the baby overcome the cardiorespiratory problem and the baby overcome the gastrointestinal fiber, can drink milk through the OGT or orogastric tube normal. So the baby is ready to have oral, or we can to have a breastfeed or to have bottle milk. But we have to identify, is there any problem apart from that, such as Usually baby have a problem with desaturation after bottle feeding, for example. Then we have to identify, because babies have a component, we call that non-nutritive sucking and nutritive sucking. Non-nutritive sucking is mean the sucking, the swallowing, and breathing is normal. But once it's coordinated with the milk, with the bottle feeding, it's become abnormal. We call the condition called the suck, swallow, and breathe problem. Usually, there's a problem with related to that. Is the most common one is laryngomalacia. So with FEES, actually, we can identify which problem that can interfere with the nutritive sucking, such as apneic episode will alter the swallowing and also the breathing. So it's a very good option if we can examine the baby right from the start, from the beginning, once the baby wants to have how to transition between the OGT into the oral feeding with this. That's my opinion. Thank you. Masih mute, Dokter?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Evi. Maybe Professor Carrel can give some addition.
We usually use a 2 millimeter flexible scope to evaluate neonates, and most of the time we look for pooling of saliva, if not of some food in the area of the piriform sinus. Usually we are going to evaluate if there's any laryngomalacia or problems in the airway, some stridor or vocal paralysis, but it's not unusual for patients being referred to us with already a fluoroscopic, barium swallow esophagogram. So some babies as early as 3-month-old or 1-month-old having a barium swallow esophagogram referred to us for spillage into the airway, and then the primary considers some fistula, if not a laryngeal cleft. So that's the time we get involved and we do an endoscopy on these patients.
Thank you, Professor Carrello. There is a message from our president, Dr. Skirman, who thanks both of Professor Rainer Carrello and Dr. Evi Zulka for the lecture. And the next question is from Dr. Ahmad Effendi. He asked about a patient. He got a consult from internal medicine. It's about a 25-year-old male patient with dysphagia. Onset is approximately one week. On physical examination, the gag reflex was negative. Swallowing examination, vomited several times after drinking water. At the hospital he worked, there are no facilities for FEES or esophagogram. He would like to ask, how is the treatment for this kind of patient? Maybe Dr. Evi Zulka and Professor Rainer Carrello can give the answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's very interesting questions. 25 years old with a 1 week episode of difficulty in breathing and also loss of gag reflex. It means it's an acute episode. So we have to take a look. Is there any problem, other problem, systemic problem in this patient? We can check whether there is also other cranial nerves also involved. We can check the 12th nerve, for example. We can check whether the patient tongue mobility and also the symmetrical of the pharynx with the headlamp And also we can hear the patient, ask the patient to phonate, and then we can hear the patient voice, whether there is a problem with the sound, whether the rhinolalia or there is the wet sounding voice. If the wet sounding voice and gurgly voice accompanied by hoarseness, then basically there is a pool of saliva in that area that can trigger nutration and aspiration. So what to do next is we have to ask the other discipline to identify. Mostly maybe it's related uh, to a neurologic problem. And also we can ask we can do what we can do as soon as possible. If we can put the NG tube to maintain the adequate intake of the patient. Then we woke up, and then actually we have to see the patient identify as precisely as possible. We can send the patient to a center that is the higher center. And don't forget that they have to check whether there's a problem with the chest, whether there is also an aspiration there. So we can see if there is a problem with this gag reflex. Probably there's increase also cuff reflex, and it's related to the aspiration. Probably that's what I can think of. And maybe there's some additional letter from Professor Karim. Yeah.
Yes, please, Professor Rainer Carrillo.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A 25-year-old male without gag reflex, and we start thinking of how to secure a good swallow or a good nutrition. So, without thinking of the other causes, how do we keep the airway from being compromised? So we may use NGT or nasogastric tube insertion, but remember that NGT also promotes some form of a reflux. Okay. And of course, we can position the patient properly and manage this patient to avoid some form of reflux. And if there's pneumonia, we address the pneumonia. Now, in establishing the diagnosis, there are several ways we can do, things that we can do aside from evaluating the neurologic exam. You can probe the patient on other acute causes like tetanus. I think it's still common. A 25-year-old male with sudden difficulty in swallowing, we have to rule out tetanus. Other acute causes, autoimmune problems, myasthenia. But other than that, the differential diagnosis will be a lot. When something is not automatic, you start thinking: is it the cranial nerve? Is it the brainstem or the medulla, or is there something at the neuromuscular junction level? So we start trying to probe. So I think we can do a lot of things, but having a safe nutrition first. Okay, so I think that's the most practical thing that we can do for this patient.
Thank you, Professor Carrillo. Yeah, of course, we need to diagnose first and secure the airway and intake. Let's proceed to the next question. This is from Dr. Sabrina Palupi. She would like to ask, if our hospital does not have facilities for FIS, how do we assess impaired swallowing function? This question addressed to Dr. Elvi Zulka. Please, Dr. Elvi.
Yes, thank you. In the peripheral region that don't have a scope, we can check with this questionnaire, such as questionnaire that mentioned, the E10, for example, and we check the patient physical examination. So with the physical examination, we can identify what's caused, whether it's the oral phase, in the oral phase or pharyngeal phase, or the simple one, and maybe we have a rigid scope. With a rigid scope, especially 70-degree, for example, rigid scope, we can identify these the larynx, whether there is a accumulation or a secretion there, and also we can identify problem associated with fish with feeding problems, such as the weight loss. We can identify what's wrong with apart from the problem itself. We can see the source of the problem, and second, we also can check the X-ray to identify other comorbidities. So, if in the rural area, the most important thing is use questionnaire, the unavailable physical examination that can lead the increase of probability to diagnose dysphagia.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Elvi. The next question is from Dr. Karisma Prameswari. It's also addressed for Dr. Zulka, and maybe the Professor Carrillo can add the answer. If a patient fails sensitivity test, when should we repeat the test? Should we perform a follow-up FIS after the cannulation? And for the Professor Rainer also, is there a maximal number of botulinum injection for that a patient may receive? Please, the first we give to Professor Carrillo first.
Okay. The question is there a maximum number of botulinum? The new ones, there is a lesser possibility of developing resistance from the botulinum, the newer botulinum preparation. So it's not expected that you'll have to increase the dose to have the same effect. Okay. Now, how frequent and how many times can the patient undergo botulinum? If, for example, if it's for the face or for other parts of the body, people have it every 6 months. Okay, so there should be no problem. Now, for the cricopharyngeus, the question is, how is the patient willing to undergo a general anesthesia if it's by direct laryngoscopy or esophagoscopy? So that's one limitation. But the anatomy is much clearer with direct laryngoscopy. There are other cricopharyngeal Botox injection that can be done by EMG guidance or ultrasound guidance, but still these approaches are quite sort of a blind procedure, and there's always that danger of injecting it into the adjacent structures instead of the cricopharyngeus. So that's my take on the how many times the Botox can be given. Now, having said that, we have to prepare the patient for a formal myotomy if the patient will consent. Okay. So I think that will be the next step for these patients.
Thank you, Professor Carrillo. And the first question for Dr. Elvi Zulka is about standardized endoscopic evaluation, Soleng evaluation for tracheostomy decannulation. Please, Dr. Elvi Zulka.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very interesting because our hospital also still conducting this research regarding the test in tracheostomized patient, especially in a patient who has neurologic in origin. So if the patient failed, still doesn't show any score in sending secretion, in managing the secretion, or the patient still swallow less than 2 in 2 minutes, or still hasn't got any laryngeal auditory reflexes in such test, then the patient failed. Because there's several problem contributes to the problem with the airway. Usually we ask the patient to have speech therapy for one course of the treatment. It's like 1 month. Then we can evaluate the patient to have CSAT, to have decannulation. And if it succeeds, then we can decannulate the patient. Then we follow by FIS. Yeah, because after succeeded with the CSAT, we also introduce food like puree or other kind that can be tolerated by the patient. If the patient still have dysphagia that relates to the origin of the disease, like a stroke, for example, then we can ask also our colleague to do the rehab, to have another 6 course to have examination. So in the beginning, in the first, we do the FIS right away after the CSAT, and after that we evaluate in the patient after physical rehabilitation involvement in dysphagia of this patient. So actually, it's really cross-related, really related, CSAT and FIS. CSAT, it means that decannulation, and sometimes the dysphagia is still there, although it's mild. Then we have to continue putting the patient into therapy. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Elvi Zulka. I think we still have just 3 minutes. Let me try to make a conclusion. This not, of course, it's not a conclusion, but as we know, there are some advantages for doing FIS instead of video fluoroscopy evaluation of following number of especially in radiation exposure. Excuse me. Okay, and there is some advantages too in botulinum toxin injection. All we know before, we use it for voice dysfunction, but the Professor Rainer Carello give us a nice explanation that botulinum toxin injection can help our patient with dysphagia too, and in the future we can have more of a patient that come with dysphagia. I think I should give this meeting to the MC, Dr. Anggi.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much, Dr. Aliandra. Dr. Aliandri, for leading this lecture meeting very smoothly and attractive. We've learned a lot from this lecture meeting. Wait, I will start my video. Okay. And thanks to our speaker, Professor Dr. Rainer Carello and Dr. Elvi Zulka for the great presentation and a lot of information and knowledge which have been given to us. May it be useful for us. And of course, thanks to the audience that had participated actively. And ladies and gentlemen, finally we get to the last session in the event that is closing. Let's close this event by saying Hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. As the master of ceremony, thanks to Dr. Aliandri as moderator, Prof. Rainer and Dr. Elvi Zulka as the speaker, Dr. Sukirman, Prof. Yani, Dr. Marlinda, so all otolaryngologists, doctor, the committee, and the audience entirely. May what we had conducted will be useful for us. Amin. If in guiding this event I made mistake or offend someone here, please forgive me. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.